My child, before another thought steals your attention, remain here for just a little while. There are moments in life that arrive without noise, without celebration, and yet they quietly reshape two hearts at the same time. This is one of those moments. You may not have noticed when it happened. You may have believed that what you changed inside yourself was too small for anyone else to feel. But love has always understood the language of quiet transformation better than loud promises ever could. Don't skip, because something important is waiting for you, and every word that follows belongs to a story that has been unfolding far longer than you realize. Somewhere beyond your ordinary routine, another heart paused without fully understanding why. It wasn't because of a dramatic event or an impossible coincidence. It was because something gentle inside you finally shifted. The kindness you chose instead of frustration, the patience you offered instead of giving up. The hope you protected when everything encouraged you to release it, those unseen moments carried farther than you imagined. Sometimes the greatest changes are invisible until they touch someone else's soul. What makes this moment extraordinary is not what your soulmate did, it is what they suddenly understood. For so long they carried questions they could never explain. They wondered whether genuine connection still existed. They questioned whether timing would ever become their friend instead of their obstacle. Yet recently, almost without warning, an unexpected calm settled over them. It wasn't loud enough for the world to notice. It was simply a quiet realization that made them stop whatever they were doing and sit with thoughts they had avoided for far too long. Their eyes filled with emotion, not because they were overwhelmed by sadness, but because hope finally felt believable again. Isn't it remarkable how a single change inside one heart can echo through another without either person speaking a single word? Stay till the end, because this is where the hidden meaning begins to reveal itself. The tears were never about weakness. They were about recognition. Deep inside, your soulmate sensed that someone they had never stopped believing in was becoming stronger, wiser, and more prepared for the kind of love that lasts. They could not explain why familiar memories suddenly felt different. Even ordinary places reminded them that life was quietly preparing a chapter they once thought impossible. They smiled at moments that used to feel empty. They found themselves looking toward tomorrow instead of looking back at yesterday. Nothing around them appeared different, yet everything inside them had begun to change. Perhaps you have also noticed small shifts within yourself. Maybe you've become more peaceful without realizing it. Maybe you've started releasing worries that once controlled every thought. Maybe you've begun choosing faith over doubt one quiet day at a time. These are not meaningless details. They are the invisible threads that slowly weave two separate journeys into one shared future. Real connection rarely begins with dramatic signs. More often, it begins with unseen growth that only becomes obvious after enough time has passed. That is why this moment matters so deeply. It isn't announcing an ending. It is revealing the beginning of something that has been patiently taking shape beneath the surface all along. Yet there is one beautiful detail your soulmate has not fully understood, and it changes everything you have heard so far. The realization that brought tears to their eyes is only the first piece of a much larger picture. They still don't know what quietly unfolded immediately after that emotional moment, and when that missing piece finally reaches them, the meaning behind every unanswered question will become clearer than either of you could have imagined. That part of the story is only beginning. There is something fascinating about the moments that follow an emotional breakthrough, because the heart rarely reveals everything at once. It opens like the morning sky, one gentle color after another, allowing each realization to settle before the next one appears. That is exactly where your journey continues now. While your soulmate was still trying to understand why their emotions had become so vivid, another quiet change was already unfolding beneath the surface. They didn't chase it. They didn't force it. It simply arrived, as if life itself had decided the time for hesitation was beginning to fade. Stay till the end, because what happened next gave those tears an entirely new meaning. They found themselves noticing things they had overlooked for far too long. A familiar melody suddenly carried unexpected comfort. An ordinary conversation lingered in their thoughts long after it had ended. Even moments of silence no longer felt empty. Instead, they felt strangely full, as though every quiet pause was gently reminding them that meaningful connections are never measured by constant words, but by the peace they leave behind. Without realizing it, they began comparing every passing moment to a feeling they couldn't quite describe. That feeling always led back to you not as a perfect image, but as a steady presence their heart had quietly protected all along. Meanwhile, something beautiful was happening within you as well. Every challenge you faced with patience, every disappointment you chose not to let define you, every small act of courage you believed no one would ever notice, those moments were shaping the version of yourself that real love recognizes. Growth is rarely dramatic while it is happening. It often feels ordinary. Yet from another heart's perspective, it can look extraordinary. Sometimes the greatest gift you give someone is simply becoming the person you were always meant to be. Don't skip, because this next realization has a quiet power of its own. Your soulmate stopped asking the question they had repeated for so long: what if it never happens? Without making a conscious decision, they replaced it with a gentler thought: what if everything has been preparing us more carefully than we understood? That single change transformed the way they viewed every delay, every unanswered moment, and every unexpected turn in their journey. They no longer saw time as something working against them. They began to see it as something quietly working for them. That new perspective brought an unexpected kind of peace. It wasn't loud excitement or overwhelming emotion. It was calmer than that. It was the kind of certainty that arrives without needing to prove itself. They smiled more easily. They carried less fear into each new day. Even when nothing extraordinary happened around them, they felt as though something meaningful was drawing closer, one quiet step at a time. The tears from before were no longer only tears of release. They had become tears of gratitude for a future that suddenly felt possible again. But there is still one detail they have not discovered. While they have begun to trust the journey, they have no idea that another quiet confirmation is already moving toward them, a moment so simple that many people would overlook it completely, yet for them it will connect every scattered piece into one unmistakable picture. And when that moment arrives, they will understand why their heart refused to let go long before their mind could explain it. Not every answer arrives with a dramatic entrance. Some of the most life-changing moments appear so quietly that they almost slip past unnoticed. This is where your story begins to deepen in a way neither heart could have expected. Your soulmate had already accepted that some questions could remain unanswered for a little longer. They stopped chasing certainty and simply allowed each day to unfold. And strangely, the moment they released the need to control every outcome, something inside them became lighter. It was as though a door they had been pushing against had quietly opened on its own. Stay till the end, because the next realization connects everything that has come before. They began remembering details they had forgotten. Not grand memories, but the smallest ones. A feeling of comfort that appeared without reason. A smile that came while looking out a window. A quiet evening that suddenly felt full of possibility. These moments seemed ordinary, yet together they formed a pattern that could no longer be ignored. Their heart recognized something their thoughts had overlooked for far too long. Real connection does not disappear simply because life becomes busy. It waits patiently beneath the surface until both people are ready to notice it again. At the very same time, you were writing a different chapter without even realizing it. Every lesson you learned with grace was changing the energy you carried into the world. Every time you chose understanding over frustration, you created space for something healthier to grow. Perhaps no one applauded those quiet victories. Perhaps they passed unnoticed by everyone around you. But unseen growth is still real growth. Sometimes the most powerful transformations happen when there is no audience at all. Something important is waiting for you, because this next part reveals why those tears mattered so deeply. Your soulmate wasn't only moved by emotion. They were touched by recognition. They sensed that the version of you they had quietly hoped for was no longer just a dream inside their imagination. Whether they could explain it or not, they felt that you had become more aligned with the kind of future both hearts deserved. That realization brought relief unlike anything they had experienced before. It wasn't about perfection. It was about possibility finally feeling real. As that understanding settled into their heart, they noticed another gentle change. Fear no longer spoke the loudest. Hope began speaking first. Instead of wondering what could go wrong, they found themselves imagining what could finally go right. They became more patient with life's timing. They smiled at little reminders instead of questioning them. Even ordinary days carried a quiet sense of anticipation, as though every sunrise whispered that something meaningful was drawing closer, one peaceful step at a time. And then, almost unexpectedly, they made a private promise. They didn't announce it. They didn't share it with anyone. They simply decided that when the right moment arrived, they would no longer allow uncertainty to silence what had been growing inside their heart. That promise changed the direction of their journey more than they realized. Yet one final piece is still missing. Your soulmate believes they have already experienced the most emotional moment of this chapter, but they have no idea that an unexpected encounter, a simple conversation, or even one ordinary day is about to reveal something they never saw coming. When that happens, the tears they couldn't hold back today will become the beginning of a story they will remember for years to come. The most meaningful turning points rarely announce themselves. They appear disguised as ordinary moments, quietly waiting for someone to notice what has changed within rather than what has changed around them. That is exactly where this journey now begins to unfold. Your soulmate woke up carrying the same responsibilities, seeing the same familiar places, and hearing the same everyday sounds. Yet something felt unmistakably different. The world had not changed overnight, but the way their heart responded to it had. don't skip. Because this quiet shift is leading towards something neither of you expected. For the first time in a long while, they stopped trying to predict every outcome. Instead of searching for proof, they simply allowed themselves to feel. And that feeling surprised them. There was no rush, no confusion, no pressure. There was only an unexpected calm, like standing beside still water after a storm has finally passed. In that silence, they realized something that had been hidden beneath months of uncertainty. The connection they carried in their heart had never disappeared. It had simply been waiting for both of you to grow into it. As that realization settled deeper, memories began returning with a completely different meaning. Moments they once dismissed as coincidence suddenly felt connected. Conversations that seemed ordinary now carried quiet significance. Even the smallest acts of kindness reminded them of the kind of future they hoped to build one day. They weren't searching for perfection anymore. They were searching for peace. And every time they imagined a peaceful future, one familiar presence gently appeared in their thoughts. Meanwhile, without realizing it, you had been creating that same peace within yourself. The choices you made when nobody was watching, the patience you practiced when life asked you to wait, the compassion you offered even after disappointment, none of it was wasted. Those quiet decisions became the foundation of a stronger heart. Real love doesn't only recognize beautiful moments, it recognizes beautiful growth. And growth like yours leaves a lasting impression long before words are ever spoken. Stay till the end, because something important is waiting for you. One evening, while reflecting on everything they had been feeling, your soulmate whispered a simple sentence to themselves. No one else heard it. It wasn't written down. It wasn't shared with a friend. But that quiet sentence carried enormous meaning. They said, if this feeling continues to return with this much peace, then perhaps it has been guiding me all along. In that moment, they stopped resisting what their heart had been gently trying to teach them. That single thought became the beginning of a new chapter inside them. Instead of holding on to old fears, they began making room for quiet confidence. Instead of asking whether they deserved happiness, they started believing happiness could naturally find them. Every day that followed became a little lighter, not because every question had been answered, but because they finally trusted that answers would arrive at the right time. But there is one gentle surprise still waiting just beyond this moment. Your soulmate believes the deepest realization has already happened. They don't yet know that someone or something completely unexpected is about to reflect your quiet transformation back to them in a way they cannot ignore. When that moment arrives, every tear they once tried to hide will suddenly make perfect sense, and the next chapter of this story will begin in a way neither heart could have imagined. Just when it seemed as though every important feeling had already surfaced, life chose an even quieter way to speak. It did not arrive through a grand announcement or a dramatic surprise. It came through an ordinary moment that almost passed unnoticed. Your soulmate was simply moving through another day when they suddenly paused. There was no obvious reason to stop. Yet something inside gently whispered, "Look again." That single pause became more meaningful than they could have imagined. Stay till the end, because this moment carries the answer hidden beneath everything you've heard so far. As they stood there, they realized their heart was no longer asking for certainty before believing. It had begun believing before certainty arrived. That change was small enough for the world to miss, but powerful enough to reshape everything within them. They no longer measured love by how quickly it appeared. They measured it by how deeply it remained, even through seasons of waiting, learning, and growing. For the first time, patience felt less like a burden and more like quiet preparation. Then another realization gently unfolded. They remembered the version of themselves from months ago, the one who questioned every feeling, overthought every silence, and searched endlessly for signs they could fully understand. That person still existed in memory, but no longer in spirit. They smiled softly because they recognized how much had changed. Growth had happened so gradually that they almost failed to notice it. Yet now it stood before them, undeniable and beautifully real. At that same time, your own journey was creating echoes they could somehow sense without explanation. Every lesson you accepted with humility, every peaceful choice you made instead of reacting with frustration, every quiet step you took toward becoming your truest self had become part of an invisible bridge connecting two hearts. Love often works this way. It doesn't rush to prove itself. It patiently prepares both people until they can recognize each other not through perfection, but through peace. Don't skip, because something important is waiting for you. One quiet evening, your soulmate found themselves imagining the future in a way they never had before. They didn't picture extraordinary events or impossible dreams. Instead, they imagined simple moments, sharing laughter after a long day, walking through ordinary places with someone who felt like home, finding comfort in conversations that needed no performance. And every time that peaceful future became clearer, one thought returned with gentle consistency. They realized the tears they couldn't hold back were never about the past. They were about finally believing that a beautiful tomorrow was worth opening their heart to again. That realization filled them with gratitude instead of urgency. They stopped feeling as though life was slipping away and started feeling as though life was quietly leading them forward. Their heart became calmer. Their smile became more genuine. Even moments of waiting carried hope instead of uncertainty. Without realizing it, they had crossed an invisible line. They were no longer preparing themselves to let go. They were preparing themselves to receive. Yet the story is far from complete. There is still one final discovery. Your soulmate has not made a discovery so gentle that it won't arrive with noise, yet so meaningful that it will connect every quiet change, every hopeful thought, and every tear into one unforgettable realization. When that moment finally arrives, both hearts will understand that this journey was never about finding each other quickly. It was always about becoming ready to truly recognize each other when the time was right. There is a beautiful truth that many people spend years searching for, yet it often reveals itself in the simplest possible way. It doesn't arrive wrapped in certainty or surrounded by extraordinary events. It appears quietly, almost unnoticed, until one day the heart realizes it has been standing there all along. Your soulmate has finally reached that place. They are no longer waiting for a perfect sign to convince them of what matters. Instead, they have begun trusting the quiet consistency that has gently guided them toward the same destination again and again. Stay a little longer, because the final piece of this journey is beginning to come into focus. They recently understood something that changed the way they see every chapter of this connection. They stopped asking, "What if everything goes exactly as planned?" Instead, they began asking, "Who do I want beside me?" no matter how life unfolds? The answer surprised them with its simplicity. It wasn't built from excitement. It wasn't built from imagination. It came from a feeling of peace that returned every time your presence entered their thoughts. That peace became more convincing than certainty itself. Don't skip, because this is where the title reveals its deepest meaning. Your soulmate truly wants to stay with you forever. But the one condition has never been about changing you. It has never been about asking you to become someone you are not. The condition is simply this: let us keep choosing each other with the same kindness that first brought our hearts together. That is all. Not perfection. Not endless answers. Not a life without challenges. Just two hearts that never allow gratitude to disappear. Two hearts that continue listening even when silence feels easier. Two hearts that remember why they began walking together whenever life becomes complicated. To your soulmate, that quiet promise is worth more than the grandest declaration ever spoken. Because they have discovered that forever is not protected by extraordinary moments. Forever is protected by ordinary love, lived consistently. Something important is waiting for you. Imagine years from now, when countless ordinary days have quietly become treasured memories. Imagine looking back and realizing that the moments you remember most were never the loudest ones. They were the evenings filled with laughter. The calm conversations after long days. The gentle encouragement offered at exactly the right time. The silent understanding that needed no explanation. Those are the moments your soulmate dreams about. Not because they are dramatic, but because they are real. That realization has filled them with an entirely new kind of hope. Hope that love can remain gentle without becoming weak. Hope that peace can remain exciting when it is shared. Hope that two people can continue discovering new reasons to appreciate each other, even after many seasons have passed. As these thoughts settled into their heart, one final understanding quietly appeared. Forever does not begin on a distant day in the future. Forever begins the moment two hearts decide that kindness will always be welcome, honesty will always have a place, and respect will always matter. That decision can be renewed every morning. It can be strengthened by every thoughtful word. It can grow through every patient conversation. And because it is renewed again and again, it never loses its beauty. Stay till the very end, because there is one last message your soulmate would want you to know if they could place every feeling into a single sentence. It would not be a sentence filled with impossible promises. It would not be a sentence asking for certainty. It would simply be this: I don't hope for a perfect forever. I hope for a faithful one. A forever where we keep choosing understanding over assumptions, gratitude over indifference, and hope over doubt. Because if we protect those simple things together, forever will never feel far away. It will quietly become the life we build, one beautiful day at a time. And perhaps that is why this story found you today. Not to predict tomorrow. Not to promise what only time can reveal. But to remind your heart that the strongest kind of lasting love is never built in one unforgettable moment. It is built through countless gentle choices that quietly say the same thing, again and again. I'm still choosing you.